is Ryan Howell. And Ryan says that in college, fueled by both Red Bull and vodka, he single-handedly introduced the concept of glow sticks and raving to the country of Sweden, which, bearing in mind what I just told you, is maybe some sort of karmic exchange for that country. So let's hear it for Ryan.
I don't believe in mystical things, and I don't believe in curses, but looking back every once in a while, I sometimes seriously question my skepticism. I met my second witch of all time about a year after I had met the first, and if you don't know the story about the first witch I ever met, I'm not talking about an ex-wife. I'm talking about a real, live, well, thankfully for me, dead witch. I'm an archaeologist, and for a time in my career, I specialized, kind of accidentally, in excavating witch burials that were hundreds and hundreds of years old. You see, in the prehistoric Southwest where I was working, in Arizona, witches were a real and accepted part of everyday Native American life. I was excavating at a Hohokam pit house village that was about 700-800 years old outside the deserts of Tucson, Arizona. This pit house village was occupied. When it was occupied, they lived in these kind of mud huts that were semi-subterranean. Nothing remained on the surface, but you could still find the foundations and the floors of these pit houses. We were excavating in one, and we hit a layer of pottery. Now, finding pottery on an archaeological site is usually not a big deal, but this was different. This was a whole solid layer of hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of little pieces of pottery stacked carefully on top of each other. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen in this little space we were excavating. We excavated down through that layer of pottery, and we hit a burial. Now, again, we excavated the burial, and again, it was like nothing we had ever seen before. Right in the center of the chest was a talisman that had been ever so carefully placed right there. We didn't know what this burial was about. We had excavated dozens and dozens of these kinds of burials, but never one like this, never one so unique. So we called a local member of the Tohono O'odham Reservation. We knew this man to know the ancient stories and the ancient lore of his people, which we believed were the descendants of the Hohokam. When he got there, we described the burial and what we found, and he immediately recognized it as a witch burial. He said in the past, as in today, there are good witches and there are bad witches, and this witch was an evil witch. He said you could tell it was an evil witch by that talisman that had been placed over their chest. That was placed there probably by a good witch when they had put this evil witch to death for their sorcery to keep those powers in check. Same could be said for that layer of pottery over the burial. It served like as a shield so those evil powers couldn't escape. And he feared, he told us, that when we excavated that burial, we might have unleashed that witchcraft. Later that day, one of our students, as we were piling into the trucks to leave, he said, "Ooh, we're cursed now, like, big deal." That truck immediately got stuck in the sand and took 2.5 hours to dig out. The next week, a student was climbing up a ladder, and he got to the top, and the ladder wasn't secured properly, and he fell, narrowly missing a rebar dug in the ground about that high. He would have impaled himself out in the middle of the desert with no hope for rescue for hours. When that event happened, the whole tone of the excavation changed. You could feel it in the air. You could feel it. You could feel a darkness, a cloud kind of settle in, something ominous, but you couldn't quite figure out what it was. And then those whispers, they started up. Curse. About a week after that, there was an older volunteer on our project who went to relieve himself in the desert outside of the excavation, and he became disoriented, as you can do in such an inhospitable desert, and he went missing for 3 hours in 110-degree heat before a search party finally found him, thankfully alive. And those whispers kind of continued. Curse. Then a young student had learned that the Ho'okam, those ancient people whose village we were excavating, used to use a plant called datura to induce visions during their sacred ceremonies. The proper way, however, to ingest datura is to take one tiny seed, about the size of a poppy seed, crush it, split that into tenths, take one of those tenths, put that in a gallon of water, shake that up, and then drink that 1 gallon of water with 10 of your best friends. He ate the whole one seed by himself. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and I'm not joking. He suffered permanent brain damage. And the whispers continued, curse, curse. They just kept going. And then after that, I met there was a young French woman on the project who had, I asked her politely, so I said, please stop cheating on my roommate who you're dating. And she said, you mind your own business, you fucker. Now, I don't believe in curses and I don't believe in stereotypes, but it turns out French people are very rude. There were a series of other mishaps. There were flat tires, there were broken shovels. There was an unusually large number of rattlesnakes that appeared on the excavation, to which my own mother can attest to. There was a swarm of bees that attacked us, and the whispers continued, curse, curse. And then what I consider to be the most tragic thing of all happened. I met a woman on that project who I would marry, and after 5 years of marriage, she would tell me that she's leaving me for another man old enough to be her father. I thought that was quite a rude way to tell your spouse you wanted a divorce, and I wonder if she has French in her ancestry. I don't believe in mystical things, and I do not believe in curses, but every once in a while I think maybe leaving evil witch burials alone is a good idea. I do not believe in mystical things, and I do not believe in curses. But looking back, I sometimes seriously question my skepticism. Thank you.